Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Israel's Defence Minister Israel Katz has warned that Hamas leaders, both political and military, will be targeted without immunity after recent Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Katz has also banned Red Cross visits to Palestinian detainees under Israel's illegal combatants law, amid ongoing ceasefire talks mediated by Qatar, Egypt and US as well as Turkey. Israel has reinstated the Gaza ceasefire after carrying out a wave of airstrikes that killed over 100 people and targeted dozens of militant sites, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. The IDF has also claimed its strikes eliminated 30 commanders in Gaza, while local hospitals and civil defense has reported heavy civilian casualties, including 35 children, according to Gaza's health ministry. The United States and South Korea have agreed to keep reciprocal tariffs at 15% after a preliminary deal earlier this year. Both countries will reduce tariffs on automobiles and auto parts from 25% to 15%. Hundreds of protested in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, as elections criticized for suppressing the opposition took place. With the police station set on fire, protesters gathered on Nelson Mandela Road, chanting for their country back after burning the station. Bangladesh's exiled former leader Sheikh Hasina has warned that banning her Awami League party from next year's elections could deepen national divisions. She has accused the interim government of disenfranchising millions of her supporters after the party was barred under the Anti-Terrorism Act amid war crimes investigations. According to reports, Russian air defense systems have reportedly destroyed 100 Ukrainian drones overnight with no casualties or damage confirmed. The incident highlights the ongoing intensity of military operations between Russia and Ukraine. The Netherlands held a snap election seen as a crucial test for Europe's far-right, with Geert Wilders' anti-immigration freedom party known as PVV running with 3 other parties, while over 50% of voters remain undecided. However, all mainstream parties have ruled out forming a coalition with Wilders amid growing polarization over immigration and housing. The United States will reduce its military presence in Europe by suspending the rotation of a combat brigade deployed across several NATO countries, according to Romania's defense ministry. The move comes as Washington reassesses its force posture on NATO's eastern flank. Now we start with Middle East. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that Hamas leaders will be targeted without immunity following a new wave of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Katz has said that both political leaders abroad and military figures hiding in tunnels would be held responsible for attacks on Israeli forces, declaring that whoever raises a hand against an Israeli soldier, his hand will be severed. He has confirmed the Israeli military has been instructed to act decisively against Hamas's targets. The remarks have come despite ongoing mediation efforts by Qatar, a key broker in the fragile ceasefire deal alongside Egypt, the United States and Turkey. Meanwhile, Katz has ordered a ban on International Committee of Red Cross visits to Palestinian detainees held under Israel's illegal combatants law. He further argued that allowing access would seriously harm state security, saying the safety of Israeli citizens must come first. Separately, Israel's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oren Marmoshtein has delivered an emotional briefing describing a video that Israeli officials say shows Hamas terrorists throwing the remains of an Israeli hostage from a window and later staging a fake recovery with the Red Cross. He has called the footage barbaric and accused Hamas of manipulating the families of hostages and lying about the location of remains. The Red Cross has condemned the alleged staging, calling it unacceptable in the midst of ongoing efforts to uphold the truce. Marmorstein has said that Hamas has repeatedly and deliberately violated the U.S.-brokered ceasefire, arguing that Hamas is acting to sabotage President Trump's peace plan, which calls for the group's disarmament. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Matti Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you very much, Matti, for joining us. Good to see you. Matti,
thank you, Tuma.
Thank you. Matti, what is going on here? What are we supposed to believe over here? Please tell us.
Well, I can only tell you what is our point of view, because we are seeing again and again and again and again the Hamas crossing all the red lines, breaking all the things that they agreed to be part in the ceasefire. Israel redeployed. Israel gave back all the Hamas and other prisoners, exactly all the number that they say, but they didn't give back all our hostages. And when we say all of them, we mean live and dead as well, because for us it's the same, live, life, and also dead. And they are not giving them back. We know that most of them, at least 80% of all the hostages that they stay with them, they know exactly where they are, and they are not giving them back. We even, IDF show how are they mounting a kind of plays and games and filming like they are doing some effort to localize them, but it's not really true. And they are also trying to attack their soldiers. So even Trump said, when Israel is attacked and soldiers are dead, they have the right to defend themselves. So if the world shouts, why they only killed 2 soldiers and you killed 80 or 90 or 100 terrorists, so this is not the question. The question is why is not Hamas doing what they should do to implement also from their side and fulfill all the points of the agreement. And this is, of course, something that can be stopped when the Hamas will change their behavior. I mean, you know, only in the last days, they shoot on the knees of opponents, 500 people. You didn't listen even one person in the world talking against this. This is barbarian. They are behaving in a barbarian way, and world cannot praise Israel for reacting to this barbarian behavior. So they must change the way. They have to tell their masters in Iran, or maybe the people that give them money like Qatar, please tell us what to do, because we are losing the grip of the power, and that's exactly what is going on. So more dead, less dead, this is a war, and they must fulfill their part.
And Matti, can you please source the news that you have shared? You've also shared that, you know, these news is not covered. The Hamas's atrocities are not covered in media. Is it covered in Israel?
Of course, it's covered in Israel, and it's also covered in some media, but very few. I mean, when you see the big media, even in the States, even in Europe, you're all the time, oh, Israel is again attacking, or is not fulfilling the agreement. Israel is fulfilling completely the agreement. You know, people inside Israel, they have different political opinions about the government doing this or doing that. But from this point of view, Israel is fulfilling everything. And what happened also with the ICRC that you were talking before, they were blamed by Israel that they were not doing also their task. Because the Red Cross is a very important thing in the world. And it was always a very important thing to provide their aid and everything also from the Gaza Strip. But what about 2 years of keeping silence about 250 hostages, not demanding not even one time to go inside, to bring them medicaments, to give them some kind of help? They never are from the part of Israel, so something must be wrong with them and with their behavior too. So if ICRC is going to change also their path, I am sure that Israel is going to cooperate too.
Thank you, Maddie, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Gaza's Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency has stated that hospitals have issued a statement on the overnight Israeli strikes in Gaza. The agency has reported that over 100 people were killed across the Palestinian territory in the Israeli strikes. Spokesman for the agency, Mahmoud Bassal, has stated that at least 101 fatalities were brought to hospitals, including 35 children. The Israeli government has stated that it had hit dozens of facilities in response to the ceasefire violations by Hamas. This is significant as it is the biggest strike since the ceasefire agreement came into effect, which was brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. However, Israel has also stated that the ceasefire is back in effect after the strikes. Now for this discussion, we go back to Maddie Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you, Maddie, for staying with us. Maddie, although, of course, you've mentioned all the reasons why this has happened or why this was necessary from Israel's perspective, is there any way that civilian casualties could be lessened or, they could be protected somehow?
It's very complicated because when Israel redeployed, they knew that they left untouched many things that they are in power again of Hamas, like dozens of kilometers of tunnels, weapons, and they didn't go inside, even despite that this is very bad for the future of the security future of Israel if things are going to down again. But and then they are all the time breaking the ceasefire. And then Israel is again going inside and making explode a couple of tunnels that they found. And this is also provoking all kinds of injuries and death from terrorists that they were inside. So there is no truth exactly about what is the quantity of terrorists and the quantity of, unfortunately, civilians that there were around, and the terrorists were using them as human shields. So this can be implemented also with this international coalition, and Trump are going to really take things in their hands because Israel cannot redeploy and just wait that their soldiers are going to be attacked and killed. And the same with all the terrible things that Hamas is doing to their own population. If it's going to be a coalition with teeth, a coalition that is going to attack and stop Hamas, things are going to be better. In this way, the world is leaving Israel to do all the dirty work, and we are going back and back to the same point. So we must see also a strong response from people that should be responsible for this, like Turkey, like Qatar, like Indonesia, like all those countries that want to be inside. But if they want to be inside, are they going to stop Hamas, or are they going to be from their side? This is a big question. Someone must respond to this.
Yes, and what other challenges do the ceasefire agreement is facing to move on to second phase 2?
The biggest one is to give humanitarian aid. Israel wants to continue because it's in their own interest that they fulfill the agreement and the humanitarian aid is going inside. Hamas is again trying to obstacle all these efforts and also trying to get all the trucks and the humanitarian aid for themselves. So everything stopped now. Who is suffering? The population of Gaza who is alive, and the society in Israel that the bodies of their hostages are not coming back. I mean, we are going back again and again in all the interviews to one simple thing. Hamas must be stopped. Hamas must be disarmed. And they are no alternative for any military question to these answers. So they can be maybe part of a future government, Palestinian government, if they put some of their people in technical places. But from the military point of view, everyone in the world, not only Israel or Trump, but Europe, but the moderate Arab countries, anyone understand that Hamas must be stopped.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Maddie, for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from Israel. Now we move on to Asia. In Gyeongju, South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung has formally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to allow South Korea access to fuel used in nuclear-powered submarines during bilateral talks on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. President Lee has emphasized that Seoul is not seeking nuclear-armed submarines, but rather nuclear propulsion to better track North Korean and Chinese vessels. Let's listen in.
추진 잠수함의 연료를 우리가 공급받을 수 있도록 대통령께서 결단을 좀 해주시면 좋겠습니다. 그래서 가능하다면 연료 공급을 허용을 해주시면 저희가 저희 기술로 재래식 무기를 탑재한 잠수함을 여러 척 건조해서 우리 한반도 동해 서해에 해역 방어 활동을 하면 미군의 부담도 상당히 많이 줄어들 수 있을 것이다라는 생각이 듭니다.
Lee has also asked for President Trump's support to make substantial progress on South Korea being allowed to reprocess spent nuclear fuel or an uranium enrichment. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. Good to see you. Ross, what's the significance of this submarine fuel and how can it help South Korea?
It's very significant. Anything that deepens the security relationship between South Korea and the United States is generally a win-win for both sides. They're already treaty allies. The United States is obligated to come to South Korea's aid in the event of an armed attack. Obviously, the threat is from North Korea. So again, anything that brings them closer together, enhances the relationship, brings them together for additional research and development, not things that are simply the sale of weapons, for example. This binds them together for what could potentially be a very long-term project. And I think that that's a win-win for both sides. Obviously, North Korea is going to react negatively to this if it proceeds, and China will criticize it as well, because China will say that it's further militarizing the Korean Peninsula and the region, and China might see that as a threat, which is not a surprise. But if South Korea is willing to do this, and frankly, if South Korea is willing to spend money on this, then I think the Trump administration is going to be very receptive.
And Ross, this is huge, as you've also mentioned all the rightful reasons, and like knowledge sharing in terms of military. How do you think can U.S. benefit from this as well?
Well, first, again, there is the revenue opportunity. Any sale of U.S. technology to South Korea that might be approved under this arrangement would benefit U.S. companies. So that is a significant factor here as well. But again, any further integration of the national security and military establishments of the two sides, I think the United States wants that. There's been doubts. People often raise this about President Trump's commitment to security treaties, whether that's the bilateral agreements with countries like the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea, or NATO. The criticism of Trump is frequently that he's not committed to these agreements. But the agreements do exist. And if Trump is willing to put the U.S. government in a position where it's more closely engaged with South Korea for defense purposes, that's certainly going to be welcomed in South Korea. And there are going to be a lot of people in the United States who welcome that as well, whether that's members of Congress from both parties, foreign policy experts, scholars. I think generally this is going to be received very positively.
And Ross, lastly, does this change anything in terms of balance of power in East Asia, and what are the potential risks of allowing South Korea accessing to nuclear propulsion technology?
That's a really interesting question because, again, there's the likelihood that China is going to criticize this. What at the moment distinguishes South Korea from Japan is that Japan has been more willing to show its military capabilities further afield. There are the constitutional concerns in Japan and prohibitions about that, which the new Prime Minister, Takaichi Senai, is probably going to take a very aggressive approach. But up to now, South Korea has been more circumspect. For example, South Korea has been more cautious about sailing through the Taiwan Strait or sailing in the South China Sea or even joint exercises with the Philippines or other stakeholders in the region. But the main thing to watch here is going to be China's reaction. And then a secondary issue would be, will South Korea, with this ability, seek to project its power and its capability further afield from its close-in waters?
With that, I would like to thank Ross Feingold for sharing that insight as a political analyst from Taipei. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. The European Union has condemned what it called the brutality of Sudan's rapid support forces after the paramilitary group captured the key city of El Fasher. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has stated that civilians were being targeted based on ethnicity, describing the RSF's actions as barbaric and demanding protection for aid workers, responders, and journalists in RSF-controlled areas. The EU has called for immediate and safe humanitarian access to those trapped in the city after an 18-month siege that has left thousands dead and starving. In nearby North Kordofan, 5 Sudanese Red Crescent volunteers were killed and 3 others went missing after the RSF seized control of Bara town. The RSF has descended from the Janjaweed militias accused of genocide in Darfur 2 decades ago that has been fighting Sudan's army since April 2023 in a conflict that has devastated the country and displaced millions. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for staying with us. Now looking at this, what more is going on, and could there be peace in a near future, in Sudan?
We seem very far away from any peace between the army and the rapid support forces. Unfortunately, there are other countries that, frankly, have played a role in this conflict, supporting both sides, and that's been well documented. And the reasons why those countries do that is for their own benefit, whether that's a political benefit or an economic benefit with access to certain resources that Sudan has, which could be exported. This has also, unfortunately, become somewhat of a forgotten conflict over the past few years. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza have gotten so much media attention, as well as the attention of governments around the world. And the conflict in Sudan, is as deadly as it has been for civilians, has not gotten sufficient amount of attention. Now that's changing in recent hours. There's an enormous amount of media coverage. There's an enormous amount of discussion among non-government organizations about the potential for a civilian tragedy. But is the international community in a position to really do anything about this? Given their inability to stop the war over the past few years, it doesn't look optimistic that the international community could really do anything to change the situation on the ground.
And now looking back at this, how might this history of RSF and its links to Janjaweed influence this Sudan's crisis further?
This is why there's such concern about a massacre of civilians, because there is a history of the RSF's predecessor organizations massacring civilians in this part of Sudan. So no matter what the RSF leadership is saying in recent hours, that they want to protect civilians, or they want to create a safe corridor for civilians to leave El Fashar if civilians really want to do so. Frankly, nobody believes them. They have no credibility to say that they're going to protect civilians. So there's a very legitimate concern by countries and NGOs who are starting to pay attention to this issue, but whether or not they could actually do anything, it's hard to be optimistic.
And Ross, is there any country or any kind of international national body that could go in and mediate between them? But we also saw that Red Crescent volunteers were killed today.
Very difficult. The United Nations has not succeeded in mediating this dispute over several years, just like the United Nations has not succeeded in other disputes, whether that's Ukraine or Gaza or Myanmar or other parts of the world. So one cannot be optimistic that the UN could play a role. The EU, probably not. And that really leaves the countries that have supported one side or the other in this conflict. And there's a lot of documentation and evidence about the involvement of certain countries from the Persian Gulf as well as Russia. They might be able to play a role, but they've been looking out for their own interests in this dispute, and they've not played the role of peacemaker. So that leaves one other option, which is President Trump, because he's taken an interest in playing peacemaker in different disputes around the world, and maybe he'll take an interest in this dispute.
With that, I would like to thank Ross Feingold for always joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Central America. U.S. Appeals Court awaits if Argentina must pay investors $16.1 billion over its decade-old seizure of state oil giant YPF. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan will review U.S. District Judge Loretta Prescott's September 2023 award to two minority stakeholders of YPF. Burfold Capital, which financed most of the lawsuit, could earn billions if investors do win, while Argentina is expected to appeal any loss to the U.S. Supreme Court. The outcome of the case carries significant political and economic weight for Argentina, as well as its president, Javier Milei, having recently secured a decisive victory in the midterm legislative elections. However, a ruling against Argentina in the YPF case could cause a multi-billion-dollar judgment that would add immense pressure to an already fragile economy burdened by debt, high inflation, and shrinking foreign reserves. Such a setback could weaken investor confidence and complicate Milei's efforts to attract foreign investment and fuel domestic opposition criticism. Now we have a breaking news. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced fresh advances in Moscow's nuclear weapons programs, declaring the test launch of the Poseidon strategic device a huge success, according to state media. Putin has also stated that Russia has successfully tested the nuclear propulsion system installed in the Burevestnik cruise missile, adding that its onboard reactor can be activated within minutes and seconds. The Russian president further has claimed that technologies from the Burevestnik program would be used in Russia's planned lunar missions, praising the country's scientists and saying Russia can be proud of their achievements. In a separate remark, Putin has stated that Moscow is prepared to allow journalists access to a location where he alleges Ukrainian troops are currently blocked. Now we move on to Europe. Czech election winner Andrej Babis has stated that his ANO party will sign a coalition agreement with the Eurosceptic Motorist Party and the far-right anti-European Union and anti-NATO SPD party on November 3rd. The parties are working on a joint government agenda that is set to shift policy towards higher fiscal spending and less aid for Ukraine's defense against Russia. The coalition is also aiming for less support for the European Union's migration and climate policies. President Peter Pavel has tapped Babis to lead government talks on Monday. Babis has also stated that he aims to form a government by mid-December, and which does not have a parliamentary majority, has been in talks with the motorist and SPD parties since the October 3rd and 4th elections. The coalition of these parties would hold a combined 108 out of 200 seats in Parliament's lower house. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.